Donald Trump appeared on Tucker Carlson's program, Tucker on X, during the GOP debate. He tried to snub it, tried to steal everybody's thunder, and while he didn't exactly succeed, he did garner a lot of views still. So I kind of want to check this out and see what all the hubbub was about. I'm interested in the election, and I think that we should be giving everyone a fair shot, so I watched the debate rather than this interview with these two people who have said a billion zillion things that we've already heard before. But you know, I heard that he said some crazy things. I heard Trump said some crazy things, so I do want to still check this out. So here we go. This is the full interview that Tucker Carlson did with Donald Trump.
It's debate night, but we're not in Milwaukee.
That's a little awkward.
Mr. President, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Why aren't you at the Fox News debate tonight in Milwaukee?
Well, you know, a lot of people have been asking me that, and many people said you shouldn't do them, but you see the polls have come out, and I'm leading by 50 and 60 points. And, you know, some of them are at 1 and 0 and 2. And I'm saying, do I sit there for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it's going to be, and get harassed by people that shouldn't even be running for president? Should I be doing that? And a network that isn't particularly friendly to me, frankly. You know, they were backing Ron DeSanctimonious like crazy, and now they've given up on him. I mean, it's a lost cause. It's reminded.
Well, I do think that Ron DeSantis is a lost cause, but I think that he's being a little disingenuous with this response here. I think that he is afraid of losing ground by being on a debate stage with other people who, you know, might show him up, who might be more impressive on a debate stage in comparison to him, right? We saw the debate, or at least a lot of us saw the debate. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, is probably one of the best orators that we've seen out of a presidential candidate, I think, since at least 2000. So I can see why Donald Trump would be scared to show up against him particularly. I think that Trump versus DeSantis, Trump would actually probably beat DeSantis, if I'm going to be honest, in a debate. But I think that he's just scared, right? He doesn't want to lose any ground. He's in a really good position. You know, 60% of the support is like massive, right? You know, so how much more does he have to gain by being in these debates? It's a risky proposition for him, not one that is likely to get him, you know, a ton of reward.
Did me very much of 2016. You know, in 2016, I went through the same stuff.
Also, I think it's kind of funny that he's like also kind of acting like he's afraid of like Fox News, whatever, when he went on CNN all the time, right, in 2016. Like, it's kind of funny.
And had to fight them all the way, and then they became very friendly after I won, or just about when I was winning. But I just felt it would be more appropriate not to do the debate. I don't think it's right to do it. If you're leading by 50, 60, I have one problem leading by 70 points, and I'm saying, why am I doing it? And I'm going to have 8 people, 10 people, whoever made the debate, I don't know how many it is, but I'm going to have all these people screaming at me, shouting questions at me, all of which I love answering, I love doing, but it doesn't make sense to do them. So I've taken a pass, as you probably noticed.
Well, I did. I'm grateful that you did. It's interesting, though, because you spent a lot of your career in television.
Yeah.
You had a top show in television on NBC. But you don't feel the need now running for president to do television, obviously. Do you think television is declining?
Well, according to a poll
I don't understand. How relevant are these questions going to be to the election? Like, you know, I don't know how many people are tuning into this to ask, to see if Donald Trump thinks that television is on the decline. Like, what?
I guess we just saw.
This is a distraction. This is an entire distraction. The only reason for this is to distract people from the GOP debate, which I think further demonstrates how afraid this dude is of all the other candidates, right? You know, because he could be tackling hot button, very important issues that matter to a lot of other people, and just treat this like a town hall, basically, like the Blaze TV event, like the News Nation event. But instead, he's asking all of these, like, he's answering all these, like, off-the-wall questions from Tucker Carlson that have, like, nothing to do with the election.
Well, it just came out where it's down like 30, 35%, but I think they were referring to cable. I think cable's down because it's lost credibility. MSNBC, or as they say, MSDNC, is so bad. It's so wrong what they write and what they do and what they say. It's, it's fake news, as I said. I think I came up with that term. I hope I did, because it's a good one. It's not tough enough anymore. It's corrupt news. Really what you do is call corrupt news, but somehow that doesn't play as nicely. But it is corrupt news. So you have MSNBC and you have CNN, who's absolutely doing no ratings at all. I mean, they're dead. But they're doing none because they don't have credibility. They really don't have credibility. Fox is way down, as you know. And
I will say that credibility is the only thing that will get you ratings, not to pander to the left-wingers at all, but you don't need credibility to do well. I think, for example, that Special Report with Bret Baier has far more credibility than, I don't know, Hannity, Laura Ingram's show, the Greg Gutfeld's show. But I don't think it has, I don't think it's doing as well in the ratings. I could be wrong, right? Feel free to fact check me, but I don't think that's the case. So, it's about what's entertaining, not always what's credible. But, for some people, they're not going to find the show interesting if they don't think it's credible.
The good old days are long ago. I will say this, it could come back, but they just don't have a lot of credibility, Tucker. You know that perhaps better than anybody. I think it was a terrible move getting rid of you. You were #1 on television, and all of a sudden we're doing this interview, but we'll get bigger ratings using this crazy forum that you're using than probably the debate or competition.
When you say there are people on stage who shouldn't be running for president, who do you mean?
Well, I don't want to really use names, but it wouldn't matter too much. A guy like, I call him Ada Hutchinson. It's Asa, but I call him Ada.
Why do you call him Ada?
I could tell you, but I don't want to get myself in a little trouble. But he's weak and pathetic.
What does that mean?
He was. I never understood the guy. Never knew him.
But he's right. This dude is about as Republican as John Kasich. I don't know what this dude is like on the stage to do. Maybe he's having a 7/4 life crisis or something. Or no, not 7/4. Maybe he's having like a 3/4 life crisis or something. A 3/4 life crisis where he's like, I don't know. I've got a lot of money. What can I do? Well, I guess I'll just run for president. It'll be fun. I like talking to people on TV. Like, I have no idea why this dude's running for president. I could see why the establishment would want to prop someone up like him, because, the establishment loves to throw up some sort of like moderates, corporates-ish, mainstream, middle of the road, relatively unprincipled and boring, and generally just like flaccid and unappealing candidate. Right? They love to prop people up like that. Like they're propping up, Mike Pence as well, who's just been a disaster as a GOP candidate. His candidacy has been horrible so far, but I do think that the media is doing the best to clean up his image. Asa Hutchinson is very much in the same way. I just couldn't imagine wanting to be that guy who nobody really likes, but except for the media, and they're just trying to push you and force you onto a population that just doesn't really like you. We kind of got the same thing with Joe Biden as well, by the way.
Arkansas, not a very popular guy. I don't know how but that state is such a great state. The people are so incredible in that state, and they love me and I love them. How does this guy get elected governor of Arkansas? But he's nasty always, and has been. A guy like Chris Christie, the guy left with a 8%, think of it, 8% approval rating in New Jersey. Now he's running for president, and he runs solely on the basis, let's get Trump. He's like a savage maniac. He's like a lunatic, and that's all.
Yeah, that was funny. And I think that was the best moment of the entire debate for Vivek Ramaswamy, who I think is my favorite candidate, especially after that debate, who he kind of just pointed out that Chris Christie isn't running on anything except for Trump is bad, and that is kind of silly.
He talks about his poll numbers are very, very low. He's about 2%.
What's he like? You know him well.
No, I've been friendly with him over the years, but I couldn't give him a job because I just never trusted him very much. I was just never one of his people that really trusted him. I never gave him the job, and that's one of the reasons he feels so hurt and so betrayed. And I understand that. I really do. I understand it, but I never gave him. He wanted to be different things. He was looking at different elements of the administration, and we decided. I decided just I didn't want to do it, and now I'm glad I did because you see. But we had some great people. I had great people. We'll have even better people if we do this because now I know Washington. Before I didn't know Washington. But guys like Bill Barr were terrible. I mean, they were, I would say, Bushies. I say that with respect to the Bush family, but they were Bushies, and just it doesn't work out for us.
It was clear, this is kind of far afield, but it was just interesting. I read Barr's account of his time. He wrote a book about it,
right?
His autobiography, and in it he lies about Jeffrey Epstein's death. Clearly lies. Do you think Epstein killed himself sincerely?
I don't know.
Also, how is this relevant? Why are we answering questions like, do you think that TV is dead? Do you think Epstein killed himself? Like, in any other time, I think these would be kind of, excuse me. In any other time, I think these would be interesting questions, but we're in the middle of an election season, right? Is Rupert Murdoch on the ballot in 2024? Is Jeffrey Epstein on the ballot in 2024? No. Then why are we talking about the state of television, and why are we talking about the death of Jeffrey Epstein in light of the 2024 election? That doesn't make any sense to me unless this whole event is merely supposed to be a distraction from the GOP candidates.
I will say that he was a fixture in Palm Beach.
Yeah.
I don't know what Barr said about it either. I have no idea what he said. What did he say? He killed himself, probably?
He said he killed himself and that they were going to do this investigation. They never did the investigation. It's never been public.
Well,
and they hid it. And, why are they doing that? And clearly Barr knew. But why would Bill Barr be covering up the death of Jeffrey Epstein?
Bill Barr didn't do an investigation on the election fraud either, okay? He said he did, and he pretended he did, but he didn't. McSwain, the U.S. attorney in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, said Barr just wouldn't let him do it. It was crazy. Barr became so petrified, so frightened of being impeached. They were going to impeach him. I don't know if you remember it.
Yeah.
It's not a big moment in history. But they said, we're going to impeach. They play a much rougher game, the left, the lunatics. And they were going to impeach Bill Barr, and he was petrified. Now, how do you not get impeached? Don't do any of this stuff. But he didn't do the job there. I don't know.
I didn't know that. I actually didn't know that. Is that true?
Do you think it's possible that Epstein...
Is that true? Because I don't 100% believe everything that Donald Trump says, so...
Epstein was killed?
Oh, sure, it's possible. I mean, I don't really believe. I think he.
I think I think that Tucker Carlson has kind of tried to do a Joe Rogan-esque swing, with his career. Like he's trying to become like Joe Rogan, but on Twitter. So I think it makes sense that he's asking these types of questions, but it just feels silly and frivolous in light of the real things that are going on in this country right now.
Probably committed suicide. He had a life with beautiful homes and beautiful everything, and he all of a sudden he's incarcerated and not doing very well. I would say that he did, but there are those people. There are many people. I think you're one of them, right? But a lot of people think that he was killed. He knew a lot on a lot of people.
He was killed.
You think so?
I think the closer you look, I'm not a conspiracy person at all. I believe everything I hear. But yeah, the closer you look into it, I mean, the Attorney General of the United States, your Attorney General, clearly lied about the Epstein death.
Yeah,
and
he was.
Why?
He was certainly. It wasn't well done. They had no cameras. They had no anything. Everybody was sleeping, and a case could be made. Look, I'm not going to get involved in it, but I can tell you, a case could be made either way. But
a case out of cardboard, perhaps. It'd be a flimsy case.
But it certainly wasn't the most well-run place.
So the reason I'm asking you is I'm looking at the trajectory since 2015 when you got into politics, for real, and then won. It started with protests against you, massive protests, organized protests by the left, and then it moved to impeachment twice,
right?
And now indictment. I mean, the next stage is violence. Are you worried that they're going to try and kill you? Why wouldn't they try and kill you, honestly?
They're savage animals. They are people that are sick, really sick.
I don't like, and I've talked about this in my feminism video that I did a while back. I don't like dehumanizing language, calling people like when the people from TPUSA were saying call trans people it or no, they're people, and people are not its. In this case, don't call people animals, please. Like, enough of that. We already have enough division in this country, and dehumanizing language like that, I think, contributes to that. So please don't call people animals. I know that people on the left do the same thing to people on the right, but that does not mean that people on the right have the right to say that about people on the left. Because, hey, the main reason why people on the right don't really like the left-wing narratives and the left-wing nomenclature and the left-wing rhetoric is because it's bad. So why copy their language? We shouldn't.
You have great people in the Democrat Party. You have great people that are Democrats. Most of the people in our country are fantastic, and I'm representing everybody. I'm not just Republicans or conservatives. I represent everybody. I'm the president of everybody. But I've seen what they do. I've seen the lengths that they go to. When they make up the Russia, when that's exposed and they go down, and Barr should have gone after them, and other people should have gone after, and they did very late, because the Durham report came out. It was fairly good. It could have been a lot tougher, I guess, but it was fairly good. But it explained how corrupt it was. I'll tell you who did a great job was the Inspector General Horowitz. He did a phenomenal report. You didn't have to go to Durham. He did it on Comey and on.
I haven't seen his report. Maybe you guys, in the comment section can let me know. Was Horowitz's report credible? Was it impressive? Was it convincing? Because I barely remember when that came out, and I think that kind of fizzled out with the whimper. Very much how, if you remember Mike Lindell's stuff, he had all this information, and it just kind of fizzled out into nothing. It was just like a wet fart more than anything else.
I guess McCabe and some others, and it was a vicious, it was basically a true report, how bad they are. But these people are sick people. These are people that I think they hate our country. You want to know the truth. When you see open borders, when you see these policies that they have, and so many other things, it's so sad to see. We have a country that's very fragile right now. I've never seen, I will say, look, I ran in 16, which was 15, but I ran in 16, election in 16, and there was tremendous spirit. In 20, there was even more spirit. We got millions and millions more votes. It wasn't even a contest. People said, well, what'd you think of 20? I said, we did much better. We did. You got to base it on the number of votes. We got many more votes in 20 than we did in 16.
Yeah, I think that's true,
the election
right?
was rigged. It was a rigged election. And with COVID, they used COVID to cheat in a lot of different things, and we have so much on it. It's like so easy. But we had judges.
I will say at least the one thing that can be said with certainty is that they changed the rules. I don't know if that means that. I don't think that changing the rules necessarily makes things cheating, but they did change the rules to make it harder for Trump to win.
That didn't want to look. We had people didn't want to get involved. They called you. He's a conspiracy theorist if you say anything about the election. But I have never seen spirit like there is right now. Even coming down here, just the people on the road that are just absolutely going crazy. And the reason is, I think they like me, and I know they love my A hope they like me too. A lot of people say they don't like me, but they like my I think they like me. But I have never seen spirit like it is right now. And the reason is because crooked Joe Biden is so bad. He's the worst president in the history of our country. I don't think he's going to make it to the gate, but you never know. But he's a corrupt person, so corrupt that I took the name off Hillary. I don't do two people at one time. I took the crooked Hillary and I retired the name. That was a good day for her. I think she was very happy. And I used it for Joe because
it's funny because you have to consider that strong GOP support for Trump doesn't mean that Trump is going to win the election, right? Because you're going to need to dissuade people from voting for Joe Biden. And I think that a winning campaign could actually just be, saying, yo, Joe Biden sucks. All you geriatric Democrats stay home and don't use printout and mail-in ballots. I think that could work. You don't even have to convince people to vote for you. I think especially if I'm Trump, I would say you don't have to convince people to vote for you. You just have to convince people not to vote for Joe Biden because support for Trump is so strong that the only way that you can beat Trump is if you outvote him, if you somehow get more support than him, because, which is going to be hard, right, with someone like Joe Biden, who basically has no support, right? Barely anybody actually genuinely supports Donald Trump. So, if Trump can get even I don't know, 1/10 of Joe Biden's, current supporters to not vote, it'll be a cakewalk for him, or at least it should be.
Because it's Crooked Joe. But Joe is really...
But you don't think he's going to make it to November of 2024?
Well, I think he's worse mentally than he is physically. And physically, he's not exactly a triathlete or any kind of an athlete. You look at it.
I feel bad because this is actually probably elder abuse. I don't think that Joe Biden even knows what he's doing half of the time that he's been president. I do feel kind of bad laughing. But, he is right. This is like... This dude's on hospice levels of health status.
I mean, he can't walk to the helicopter. He walks. He can't lift his feet out of the grass. It's only 2 inches at the White House, right? That's not a lot. But you watch him, and it looks like he's walking on toothpicks. And then you see him on the beach where he can't lift a chair. Those chairs are meant to be light, right? They're like 2 ounces. He can't lift the chair. He can't.
That's actually kind of sad, though, because It's actually kind of sad, though, because I'm actually picturing, what if I was in a state that, Joe Biden is? I wouldn't want to be flown all over the country, forced to sign things that I don't even know what they are. I wouldn't want to go to a beach and then, not be able to pick up, a simple chair. But I guess that's, the fate of all of us if we all end up to be as old as Joe Biden, I suppose, to a degree.
Yeah, and I don't know what they're doing with the beach. This beach is seeming to play a big role, but... They love pictures of him on the beach. I think he looks terrible on the beach. He looks terrible on the beach.
Skinny legs.
Well, he can't walk through the sand. Sand is not that easy to walk through. But when he walks through it, he can't walk through the sand. And there's somebody in there that...
See, now he's got me thinking that Joe Biden walking through the sand. Now he's got me falling into some conspiracy theory that Joe Biden actually isn't the one walking in the sand.
That thinks he looks fabulous at the beach. I think he looks horrible at the beach. Plus, the beach doesn't represent what a president's supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be working. He's supposed to be getting us out of that horrible...
True. And I will say this. At least Trump, Obama, and George W. Bush, I think in presidents prior, when they were on vacation, what did they do? They were in a resort and they were golfing, right? They were golfing. They weren't sitting somewhere looking at some waves with sunglasses on their face. No, they were doing something. They were swinging a club, standing, walking, and sometimes talking to other influential people in politics. So even in choosing to golf versus going to the beach, I think that does show some level of, I'm relaxing, but I'm still on my toes. Sometimes the press comes up to presidents or whatever while they're golfing, and questions are asked there, right? And sometimes the president just says, "Watch this drive." Sometimes, maybe that's not the response that's given. But, I don't even know that Joe Biden could golf if he wanted to, though, and that's also kind of sad.
Horrible war that we're very much involved in with Russia and Ukraine. You could do that. You could do that very easily. I believe you could do that I don't believe he could do it because he's just incompetent. But that's a war that should end immediately, not because of one side or the other, because hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. Can you imagine you're in an apartment house and rockets are going into that building and blowing it up and knocking it down? And why should anybody, human beings, these are human, whether they're Russian or Ukrainian or whatever they are, it's got to be stopped. And it can be stopped very easily. It would have never started. If I were president, it would have never started.
So back to Biden, I'm interested. So you think he's fake?
I agree with that. It's interesting that none of this happened, with Russia and Ukraine until Trump left office.
Failing, he obviously is failing. I think it's clear to everybody. But that would make Kamala Harris the candidate?
Well, not really. I mean, I guess they'd have maybe a free-for-all. A lot of people say she has to remain for certain reasons the candidate. She has to. I don't think that's true, actually. I don't think that other people would stand for it. She has some bad moments. Her moments are almost as bad as his. I think his are worse, actually.
Yeah.
But
She seems pretty senile, too.
she speaks in rhyme.
She's not senile. She's not senile at all. She has issues, but she has issues, but senility is not one of them.
It's weird. It's weird. But she has bad moments. And
In rhyme? What do you...
well, the way she talks, the bus will go here and then the bus will go there because that's what buses do. And it's weird. The whole thing is weird. This is not a president of the United States future.
Yo, we gotta run that back. We gotta run that back.
Moments are almost as bad as his. I think his are worse, actually.
Yeah.
But
She seems pretty senile, too.
she speaks in rhyme. It's weird. It's weird. But she has bad moments. And
In rhyme? What do you...
well, the way she talks, the bus will go here and then the bus will go there because that's what buses do. And it's weird. The whole thing is weird. This is not a president of the United States future. And I think they probably have some kind of a primary and other people will get involved.
Newsom, right? I mean,
Could be. I mean, I always got along well with him, believe it or
Weird.
not. But
Weird, because Newsom is someone that everyone likes except for the people that he governs. So it's like, it's strange because I think if he was never governor, but he had the exact same profile, right? He had the same level of prominence, kept his same level of rhetoric. I think he actually would be viewed as like a rock star in the Democratic Party. But I think because California is in such a dire state, because no one particularly likes him in California, I think it'll make him running kind of hard to do. Kind of like if you're like a president of the United States and you can't win the primary in your own state. That's kind of that's the type of thing that Gavin Newsom would be facing. So I do think that it is risky for him to run, and I think that he, like some other folks, are weighing their options, and I think it's wise that he hasn't decided to run for president yet.
could be him, could be somebody else. He's got a big load on his shoulders because you look at California, what's happened. But I don't know if the American people really, the people that vote for him, I don't even know if they care. You know, you look at so many of the things that are going on, and people don't seem to be. In the old days, if you had a bad record, it meant a lot. Today, if you have a bad record, it doesn't really mean anything. You know, he looks good, he's a nice-looking guy, speaks well. But Biden, every time you watch him talking, it's like he's walking on eggs. You're waiting for him to collapse. And he almost always does. And I got to know the leaders of all of the countries, essentially.
He's right,
the
though.
big
He's
ones.
right.
And the bigger, the tougher the leader. You know, it's like sort of, I guess maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. But I got to know President Xi of China and Putin and Kim Jong-un, North Korea. Did a great job with North Korea, kept us out of a nuclear war. We would have 40,000 dead soldiers right now. They'd drop a nuke right on top of the military base. But we have 40,000 soldiers over there. And I did great. I got along with him great. That's a positive. You know, the press said, he said nice things about Kim Jong-un. I also said horrible things at the beginning. Horrible enough that he wanted to talk. And we talked, and we met in Singapore. We met actually twice. And we had unbelievable meetings. I know him very well. We were in great shape with him.
What do you think he and Xi and Putin think of Biden?
I think they can't believe it. I think they probably say this is some kind of a system. You know, they had great respect for our country. They respected me. They had great respect for our country when I was there. Every one of them. Look, if you go to North Korea, you take a look at what happened. You know, the Olympics was dead. South Korea spent billions on the Olympics. Nobody was going to go. They didn't want to get blown up. They called me and they said, we are going to let the Olympics proceed. This is North Korea. I said, you should go into the Olympics. Put your athletes in. It wasn't like, you know, they were big on athletes because, you know, failing. But they went in, and they actually participated. And within about 2 days, the entire thing was sold out. And if it wasn't me, that would have never happened. But I got along very well with him, and that's a positive thing. He does have massive nuclear power, by the way. And if Hillary would have gotten in, or if the Obama thought process continued, it would have been a nuclear war, absolutely, with North Korea. He was expecting to go into a war, and it would have been a nuclear war.
So do you think the rest of the world looks on at Biden and thinks someone else has got to be running the government?
Well, somebody else has to be.
Yeah.
I don't think he's capable of doing anything. Look, when I debated him...
I mean, he is incapable of speaking English sometimes. He's incapable of remembering where he's going in the middle of walking. This is not a case of John Fetterman, right? Where it's very clear that Fetterman, when he's speaking, that he knows what he wants to say. He's just having trouble saying it. That's not the case with Joe Biden. I think that he doesn't know what he wants to say, and he also sometimes has trouble saying it. It's just a sad state of affairs.
I said, how come, and this was in front of probably not a friend of yours, Chris Wallace. He was the moderator.
Not a friend.
I said, why is it he wants to be Mike, but he doesn't have the talent? It's one of those
bitchy little man.
He wanted to be his father, but he didn't have the talent of his father was great. His father,
little fussy man.
His father interviewed me in 60 Minutes. It was actually a 10. Can you believe it?
No, I totally believe. His father had talent, at least.
I may have been the only guy that he gave a good 60 Minutes to. He was rough.
Really?
His father was tough. He was great, though. He was great at what he did. But Chris Wallace was so upset. He was guarding this guy who wouldn't do a show, by the way. He wouldn't do. I figured. I didn't mind Chris Wallace because Biden wouldn't do a show. And it was very obvious. He kept asking him and asking, but he wouldn't do the show. So I figured he's got to like me. But he came from a different planet. But remember when I asked the question, why is it that the mayor of Moscow's wife is allowed to give you $3.5 million? Don't forget, that was brought up now. It's brought up all the time. But that was brought up by me long before anyone ever heard of it. I said, the mayor of Moscow's wife giving you $3.5 million. What did you do to deserve $3.5 million? To Biden. And Chris Wallace said, this has nothing to do with the debate. I mean, he
got in the way of the question.
No, it was crazy. And I said, well, wait a minute. He got $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. Now, people forget that, but if you go back and take a look, you will see. And Chris Wallace didn't want me to ask that question. I said, I think it's a very appropriate question.
Hold on, let me see if I can find this. Trump, Chris Wallace. Oh, that's a 40-minute debate. Not debate, but that's like a 40-minute interview. Yeah, I'll take his word for it that happened.
It turned out to be much more appropriate than people thought.
Amazing. So do you have a preference in, assuming you're the Republican nominee and all goes as you plan it to go, do you have a preference in who you run against?
In many ways, I'd love to run against him because his record's so bad. It's still horrible when you look at inflation and everything else, but...
Which is partially his fault because of the COVID stimulus checks. I'm glad that Nikki Haley pointed this out in the GOP debate.
Others also have very bad records. I mean, California's a bad record, so, should it be Gavin or should it be somebody else? When I look at San Francisco, what's happened to that incredible city? That was one of the greatest cities in the world just a short while ago, and now it's very sad when you look at it. Los Angeles, every city practically, all the Democrat-run cities. Republican-run cities are doing very nicely because they arrest people when you have crimes. And they don't go after political candidates because they think it's good. I mean, it's been amazing. My poll numbers are the highest I've ever had. But because people understand it.
Can I just ask you, that gets back to my original question. So if the protest didn't work, you got elected anyway. Yeah. Impeachment didn't work twice, obviously. Indictment is not working. Your poll numbers go up. When they raided Mar-a-Lago in August of last year, your numbers went up. They can indict you 20 times, and you're not going to lose the Republican primary because of that.
Well, so, it makes it look...
He could lose the election if the trend continues that non-Republicans continue to view him more unfavorably, the more indictments that he gets. So there is a threat to his, election campaign if that trend continues, which I think it could change. I think it could change because the mug shots out and all the theatrics that are involved with that. But I just think it's fair to point out that that's a factor.
Even more ridiculous. I mean, the 4 indictments, and maybe there'll be more. I don't know. These people are crazy.
But they're counterproductive. So if you chart it out, it's an escalation, is what I'm saying. Yeah. So what's next? After, try to put you in prison for the rest of your life. That's not working. So, don't they have to kill you now?
I think.
I would not be shocked if Trump is dead this time next year. I would not be entirely surprised. I think that would not be. I think that would surprise the nation, but it would not surprise me. I think these people have kind of demonstrated that there aren't really a lot of lengths that they are, there's no shortage of lengths that they're willing to go to keep this man from being president. And while, yes, it's terrible form and awful to kill a political candidate, and you might say, oh, not a newbie, how dare you suggest such a thing? Well, this is just like what these people have sort of demonstrated, right? That their tenacity and shamelessness kind of knows no bounds. I don't think anyone even thought that Trump would be indicted or arrested on charges of hundreds of crimes, which no one really thinks that Trump did hundreds of crimes. So this is, if you guys thought that this was an entirely realistic scenario and likely scenario and fair scenario for Donald Trump to, be arrested, be indicted, charged so many times, I mean, you have to keep your mind open that the Democrats might not just stop at jailing the dude. And especially, if you look at foreign nations, right? Whether if it's Russia, China, various African nations, whenever we see a very similar, paradigm, power structure, and dynamic when it comes to president going after, and yes, this is what's happening, the president going after his political opponents, if the opponent does not stop, this usually ends up with the opponent being dead. So I just would not be shocked if that's the outcome.
I think the people of our country don't get enough credit for how smart they are. And I'm not sure I would have said this 10 years ago, but they get it. They really get it. When somebody gets indicted, your poll numbers go down. When somebody gets indicted, you announce, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be leaving to spend time with my family and to fight for the rest of my life on this stuff. But you're out of politics. I got indicted 4 times. All trivia, nonsense, bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's horrible when you look and you look at what they're doing. The boxes hoax, I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do exactly that. He's not covered, and he's got 25 times the number of boxes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And he's got them stored in Chinatown. He's got them stored in a flimsy garage.
I actually do think that they're both covered, if I remember correctly. I don't think that materially Biden did anything a whole lot different than what Trump did, unless it comes to him keeping documents that he had from when he was vice president, although that's an entirely different thing.
Underneath his Corvette at Penn. And by the way, at Penn, he gets millions of dollars. China pays this guy millions of dollars. See, I think he's the most corrupt president we've ever had. And he also has the distinction of being the most incompetent. And I believe both. I mean, he's both incompetent and corrupt.
So
and I actually believe he's compromised because China knows so much about him. They know where the money comes from. They know where it is, who paid it, and they probably paid it. Well, they do pay Penn, and he gets $1 million. I think he takes $999,000 because keeps it a little bit under $1 million, like by $1. But
what?
He, in many ways, is a Manchurian candidate. We have a Manchurian candidate, and he's afraid to tell Russia to get out of Cuba. He's afraid to tell China to get out of Cuba. He's afraid. China now is building. Think of this. China is building military installations in Cuba. The Cuban population of Miami is not too happy because they're never going to be able to go back. And you don't even hear about it. And the worst culprit is the press, the media, because normally, when I first heard that China is building installations in Cuba, and installations means military installations, okay, they said just some communication. They did that on the islands with Japan. They took the island, they started this massive construction. And they told everybody, including the Japanese have to be very careful. They told everybody that this is a housing development. They're going to build a housing development. And I said, how come the runway is 20,000 feet long? Private jets need 4,000 feet. They don't need 20,000 feet. The big ones need 20,000 feet. They don't even need 20. And I looked at the runway. I said, that's the largest runway ever built both in width and length, for housing development. There's nobody that has a plane that big that you would have a runway that's
Why
that's
is
for
China
testing.
allowed to conduct imperialism in our hemisphere?
Well, yeah, and it's far beyond Cuba. It's all over South America.
Yeah, in the Caribbean.
So we built a thing called the Panama Canal. We lost 35,000 people to the mosquito, malaria.
Yeah.
We lost 35,000 people building. We lost 35,000 people because of the mosquito. Vicious. They had to build under nets. It was one of the true great wonders of the world. As he said, one of the 9 wonders of the world. No, it was one of the 7. It happened a little while ago, It says 9 wonders of the world. You could make 9 wonders. He would have been better off if he stuck with the 9 and just said, yeah, I think it's 9. But this is one of the true 7 wonders of the world. And you take a look at the Panama Canal. It was such an incredible engineering marvel. We sold it under Jimmy Carter. We sold it to Panama for $1. The following day, they quadrupled the amount of money that ships had to pay to get across. They didn't lose one ship. And now they've made it much bigger, and now they've widened it. They've doubled it, right? They've more than doubled it. And it's one of the most profitable things. Any time it's just incredible, right? We gave it away for $1. China now controls it. They actually control the Panama Canal. They run it, they control it. And we shouldn't let that happen. And we can't let China be in Cuba. And they'll get out. If I'm president, they'll get out. Because I had a very good relationship with President Xi, but he respected this country, he respected me, and he'll get out. And we can't let them run the Panama Canal. We built the Panama Canal.
See,
should have never.
The tough thing is, I don't know if at this point Trump's involvement with foreign policy would halt a lot of these foreign relations tensions or accelerate them. I think it's just going to be one or the other, because Joe Biden has weakened the nation to a point where, our enemies have been emboldened to make these, these otherwise kind of risky moves, against our allies, such as Ukraine, such as building up all that stuff in Cuba. And, they just feel empowered. They just feel emboldened. And, now that they've, advanced their aggressive positions upon us and upon our allies, if Trump is in office and he says, like, yo, if you do this, we're going to do that, well, are the nations just going to back down all of a sudden and be like, oh, no, sorry, Trump? Or they're going to be like, you know what? We've made some gains over the past few years. I don't think that we want to give this up on a whim just because President Trump says so. We've been building up our military. We've been increasing our strategic advantage. I think that we should take a shot at the United States while they have, weakened themselves to this point. Because, let's be honest, right? The day that Donald Trump wins the 2024 elections, if that's the case, is the day that, the enemies of the United States starts losing ground again against us strategically. And so they might be like, well, we want to, really go directly against the United States while we're at our zenith, because we don't want, to wait another 20, 30 years for a similar strategic advantage.
Have been given to Panama. We should have had it, but we gave it for $1. Think of it. They quadrupled in one day. They lifted the fees, which are, pretty big, for these massive ships to go through, right? Rather than going around the Cape and through all the tremendous storms, such beauty, when it's beautiful stuff. But you didn't want to get caught in those storms. Those were storms that wiped out the biggest ships. And we go through the Panama Canal, we built it, and we gave it away for $1. Think of that, how stupid are we? We have done the stupidest things in this country. And now we have a president that can't put 2 sentences together, can't speak, can't walk, can't talk. I don't think he gets to the starting gate, but these people do miracles. I mean, he ran.
I always feel bad laughing, but it's literally like a cartoon character.
Out of his basement, and you got away with that one because of COVID, so he sort of got away with it. They cheated on the election. But you have people that are very smart, but they're fascists and they're radical left lunatics, and they're destroying our country with the all-electric cars and the windmills all over the place, which, by the way, don't work, and they're all, most of them, made in China. For the most part, they're made in China. Germany a little bit, but China.
That's one thing about the climate agenda, right? And not just the theory of climate change being real and being caused by humans. I personally have just refrained from taking a position on that because I haven't seen a lot of the science on that. But like, there's this whole agenda that says that we should just stop producing energy because carbon is bad for the climate. And a lot of the people who are saying that, they are not actually calling for America to stop using carbon. What they're calling for America to do is rely on other nations to make the carbon for us, right? They're not saying that we should not just stop, for example, fracking and using oil, but also stop using oil from other countries and go completely oil free. They're not saying that, no. It's just like, oh, we want China and Russia and all these other nations to be making our oil rather than us making it here at home. And it's awful because, especially since those are nations that, by and large, if you look at all these plants in places like China, Russia, India, there are, there's terrible pollution, there's terrible treatment of workers. And by increasing our demand for their production over there, we are increasing the negative impacts of all of these endeavors over there. So, for example, if you were to frack here in America, like it might cause some pollution, sure, but there is so much awful pollution overseas, and we're saying that we should just force them to continue polluting their already polluted skies. That seems like one of the most climate proposals that you could ever make. How come none of these people are saying India and China and Russia should stop doing all of these carbon heavy productions? How come nobody is saying that? They're only saying that for the United States and for Europe. I feel like there's this idea that people in America should be, living here with all this clean air and this clean water, and it doesn't matter what happens to the Chinese people. It doesn't matter to the people in India. It doesn't matter to what happens to the people in Russia and all these other countries. Like, huh? I thought you guys were talking about saving the entire planet, not just, keeping the back doors of your $3 million mansions, keeping the backyards of that place, like, clean and free from smog and all this pollution, right? Then why aren't they proposing policies that line up with the rhetoric that they're spewing?
But you look at what's happening to our country, even no voter ID. I mean, why don't they want voter ID? There's only one reason they don't want voter ID, because they want to cheat. I mean, who doesn't want, the Democrat convention, the last one, they had voter ID that was this big. It looked like a prison card, this big on their chest. You walked in, they had your picture, your this, your fingerprint, they had everything. The most incredible voter ID I've ever seen. That was to get into the Democrat National Convention. But to get into vote, if you buy groceries, if you buy practically anything now, you have ID on a card, credit cards or otherwise.
But don't you think it's racist to have to show your ID?
Well, they probably say that. They use anything.
Yo, that's a fair point, right? It's a fair point. Because, I completely forgot that, people of color are just too stupid to have IDs or even know what they are or how to get them. Like, I mean, it's a good point. It's entirely racist to demand that people, present voter ID cards, present forms of identification, right? We can't help it as people of color. We're just stupid.
Not to show ID, because voter ID is pretty simple, and we could go back, and we should go back to all paper ballots, voter ID, same-day voting. France did it. France had mail-in ballots, and it was terrible. Anytime you have mail-in ballots, you're going to have massive cheating on your elections. Anytime, not just the presidential election. Anytime you have.
Isn't that the whole point of them?
Oh yeah. That's their whole point. That's their whole point. They want to cheat.
Yeah.
They have to cheat because their policies are so bad that if they didn't cheat, they couldn't get elected. Who wants open borders? Who wants high taxes?
Yo, that's true. And when it comes to who wants open borders, especially, it's interesting. These policies are not ones that minorities want, right? These are the types of policies that, a subset of the population that is not the subset of the population that the Democrats claim that they're championing. They're the only ones who want those policies, right? How many citizens are running around being like, you know what I wish happened? I wish that we had 300 illegal immigrants in our town. Like, nobody's saying that. We'll see Democrat voters being like, hey, you know what I would love to do? You know what I would do literally right now if you asked me to do so? I would house 5 illegal immigrants in my home. No one is saying that. These people are enacting these policies only because they think it will not affect them. And I think that people who these policies will affect, if they know that they will affect them, they are not quite so eager to support them.
Who wants high interest rates? Who wants to not be able to use a gas stove? Or have to drive an electric car, which,
Cavemen! We are about to enter an era of cavemen, of the caveman agenda, right? Which is like, what are we? We're gonna go back to using sticks and stones for like everything. Like, what is this? Like, is the next phase of progress going to be harpooning whales and using their fat to power the lamps that we keep in our homes, and only go back to using like fire for light? Like, what are we talking about, really?
Oh, you have a 4-hour drive, but the car only goes an hour and a half, so you have to charge it. The happiest moment for somebody in an electric car is the first 10 minutes. In other words, you get it charged, and now for 10 minutes. The unhappiest part is the next hour, because you're petrified that you're not going to be found another charger. People, I'm saying, if people,
that is true, and I do hear that things are actually getting better, but that anxiety is something that a lot of people feel.
I'm not knocking electric cars, they're fine. They're fine. But if people want to buy a gasoline car or a hybrid, hybrids are pretty good, actually. Mm-hmm. But they should be allowed to buy. They don't want to do any of this. So right now, California's in a big brownout because their grid is a disaster. The grid all over the country is sort of a disaster, but the grid in California. And yet, they want to have, in a very short period of time, millions and millions of cars going off that grid, essentially. It doesn't work.
So plug your car into a grid that's failing.
You should be able to buy an electric car. Electric cars could be fun.
Exactly. How is that supposed to work, right? It also is kind of funny, right? These cars are not made in a green way. These cars are, made with batteries that were, produced, developed, and procured using slave labor from like little kids in cobalt mines with terrible environmental situations, right? Where there's tons of smog, tons of pollution. All these power plants are also sending off tons and tons of emissions. The idea that electric cars are a green alternative to gas cars is really hilarious.
Fine if you drive short distances and you want to have, whatever, and you have plug-ins everywhere you go. They could be fine. But you got to have gasoline cars. You got to have everything. Let people buy everything. Now the new thing is your heating systems in the house. They don't want you to have a modern-day heating system. They want you to use a heating system that will cost you at least $10,000 to buy and won't work very well. None of the stuff works as well. One of the things I did with EPA is you have states, many states, most of the states have so much water. It comes out of heaven, right? The water pours down and you have it. It's there. It's got to go wherever it goes, into the oceans, whatever. It's not like a big problem. Now, in some states, they have a problem. You have some desert areas and all. Mm-hmm. For that, it's okay. But they have sinks where no water comes out. You turn it on, no water comes out. No water comes out of the shower. No water is allowed to go into the washing machine for your dishes or for your clothing.
What is he talking about? I have not heard about this. Places where you're not allowed to have water systems in your homes? Where is this?
And I avoided it.
This would be major news if this was real. Hold up. What is he talking about?
For that.
Wait, they have sinks where no water comes out?
Sure, you have restricted.
I like how the little spidey sense inside of Tucker Carlson's head kind of just what got set off because this just doesn't sound right. What is he talking about here?
It's when I say no water, very little water. You want to wash your hands, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen this, and you turn on the sink and it's very little. Or you want to wash your beautiful hair, right? And you're standing under a shower. And the suds never go, the water comes out very slowly. I'm sure you've seen this. It usually takes place in new hotels and new homes.
Yeah, you take a drill and take the
They have
limiter out.
well, you can, but now they make it so you can't do that so easily. They have a restrictor. It's called a restrictor, and it restricts the water from coming out.
Huh.
So I ended all of that, and you have to see these. They let the water come out. You know what people do? They wash their hands like 5 times longer, or in the washing machine they'll press for their, let's say the dishwasher. They'll press it, then they'll press it about 7 or 8 times.
Yeah.
They'll end up using more water, and it still won't be very good. I met with the head of Whirlpool. They were practically going out of business during my administration, and they said to me, from Ohio, incredible, great state, I love Ohio, and they were really doing badly because people were dumping washing machines all over, mostly from South Korea, but also from China. And he was explaining it's just a terrible situation. I said, let me ask you, how's the quality? He says, we're better, but they are good enough quality. But, you know, of course he's going to say that, but, you know, they are better. He said, but they don't allow us. They're dumping these machines. They're cutting us in half. They're killing us. And on top of it, the government won't let us use water in our machines. I mean, he shows me like a quarter of a bottle of water. That's supposed to be washing clothing. And I freed it all up, and I put tariffs on these countries that were selling, and the machines.
And here
coming
he's
going to
go into his anti-free
and that
free
company
trade
went from
positions here.
all the washing machine companies, they make washing machines, they make dryers, they make all of the different machines that do this kind of work, including dishwashers. And they went from a disaster area to being just thriving.
But can I ask,
they love me in that part of Ohio.
Well, I bet they do, but why?
By the way, I don't like protectionism. That led to the I'll use my more mainstream term for this. Or I guess it's the mainstream term for this. the what is it, like the baby formula shortage. It led to that because there were all these protectionist policies that were making it prohibitively expensive or near impossible to import baby formula, from other countries. But then when all the manufacturers of baby formula in the United States were having issues and they couldn't issue out supply, then that means that there's just no baby formula to be found. So I don't like protectionism. I do see why Trump and his allies support protectionism, especially like blue collar workers and stuff. I just don't think in the grand scheme of things it's the best thing to do. But I do agree with deregulating some of this stuff so that washing machines can use water and things like that. I think that is a very important feature of the washing machine, to be able to use water to wash the clothes.
Why should EPA, no one at EPA was elected by anybody,
Yeah.
Why do they have the power to decide how much water your washing machine uses? Shouldn't Congress in a democracy get to vote on that?
Yeah, you could say that. They do things that are not very...
So how do you, that's my question, how do you, if you get elected again, go back to Washington, how do you keep the agencies under control? How do you keep FBI and CIA specifically under control?
The way you do it, like I fired Comey, that was a big deal. A lot of people said, and I fired him very early. Somebody said, oh, I wish you would have fired him. There was a real question about firing him. Anyway, you understand, because when they have a 10-year term, there is a question. I fired Comey. That was a great thing. If I didn't fire Comey, maybe I wouldn't be talking to you, or I'd be talking to you about real estate or something else other than politics, right? That was a coup, in my opinion. That was a very sick deal. That was the insurance policy. You remember the insurance policy? Oh, she's going to win, darling. She's going to win. But just in case she doesn't, we have an insurance policy. An insurance policy was what they were doing. And we caught them with that. That was a very important tweet or whatever it was, text. It was a big deal. That was a big deal. The insurance policy. She's going to win 100 million to 1. That's not good odds. At least they gave me 1, right? 100 million to 1. But just in case she doesn't win, we have an insurance policy. And everybody said, that's strange. That's strange. But we caught all of that because I fired Comey. Because when I fired Comey, it was like throwing a rock into a hornet's nest. into a nest of bees, and the place went crazy.
So when you were president, are you confident that you knew everything, say, CIA was doing around the world?
No, I'm not. It's a very interesting group of people. I had very good relationships, I thought, but I was a little surprised when I got out that, things go on. Look, it's...
What were you surprised by?
I was surprised. I think it's some of the people. I was surprised that there was... I had a group of people. Look, we killed many, using the CIA, I have to say this, very bad actors. We were very good at it. You look at Soleimani, you look at al-Baghdadi, bigger than Osama bin Laden. I mean, Osama bin Laden, but al-Baghdadi did ISIS, and he was rebuilding ISIS very strongly.
And that was the CIA that did that?
That was really us that did that.
Yeah.
That was really us that did that. And Soleimani was us that did that, not so much CIA. But
and I think that what he's referring to by us is like the military, I think, right? Is that what he means to say?
Very good work with the CIA. What I started, when I looked at the 51 intelligence agents saying that was the laptop from hell was Russia disinformation, when I took a look at that, I said, that's a horrible thing. They knew it wasn't. They knew it was not. And by the way, you're talking about cheating on the election? McLaughlin and Fabrizio, great pollsters, they said a thing like that plus other things meant anywhere from 10 to 17% of the vote would change.
Whatever happened to Mike Pence? You've always been nice to Pence. I've never heard you criticize Pence. You've defended him in public many, many times. He's out there attacking you. What is that?
So Mike wants to run for president. You got to understand, in my opinion, Mike Pence had the absolute right to send the votes back to the legislatures. The Democrats and everybody said, you don't have the right. In other words, what I said, is he a human conveyor belt? You mean if he finds fraud in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in any of these states, Arizona, he has to send them to Mitch McConnell, right? That's right, sir. Well, if he finds fraud, he has to? Yes, sir. I said, so he's a conveyor belt. Boom, put him in. I said, I don't agree with that. And we had some lawyers, not all, we had some lawyers that said, no, you do have the right to send them back to the legislatures to be rechecked. Because if you look at what went on in Wisconsin, who, by the way, now agree with me, Wisconsin has been virtually, other than the fact they're not allowed to do anything statutorily, but Wisconsin has been, I mean, what they found is incredible. I mean, we won Wisconsin. But Mike Pence had the right, in my opinion, to send them back.
Do you ever talk to him now?
No, I haven't spoken to him in a long time. I was very disappointed in him. I didn't want to do what Thomas Jefferson did. Thomas Jefferson, it was Georgia. And it was, hear ye, hear ye, the great state of Georgia is not capable or allowed to tabulate their votes. And Thomas Jefferson, who was the vice president, said, is Georgia sure that they cannot tabulate their votes? Georgia is sure. He didn't send them back and have them redo it. He said, we will keep the votes of the great state of Georgia for Thomas Jefferson and his president. I didn't ask him for that. Could have done that too, but I didn't. I thought that would be turmoil. I asked him to send them back to his legislature, to the legislatures, in Wisconsin, let's say.
But why didn't he? I mean, you'd worked together for 4 years. You're the president. He's VP. You say you're aligned on everything.
I think he got very bad advice. I really do. Now, let me tell you what happened. I sat there with a few people. I think his lawyer was in the room too. His lawyer was very much against it. There were other lawyers that felt you could do it. It was one of those things that you probably, I think you could have done it. I think you can always do something if you see fraud or if you see problems. But
interesting.
It's very interesting.
Now,
so,
I'm curious. Was Mike Pence convinced there was fraud, though? Because if he didn't think that there was fraud, I could see why he would resist it, because he'd be like, oh, no, this is an exercise in futility. This will just gum up the process and the result will be the same. It's just going to be a waste of time. Let's just go ahead and push this through.
After the election was over, the rhinos got together with the Democrats and they redid the election, so you couldn't do it anymore. So then I called the people. I said, so in other words, you're saying I was right. You could do it. Yes, you could do it. In other words, they took the Voting Act And they redid it so the vice president no longer has the power to do what I said he could do. So when that happened, I said, wow. So, and you know, you'd look some of these Democrats in the eye and they say, he has absolutely no right to do it. And immediately after the election, they met rhinos, could name them all, and Democrats, and they approved legislation that takes away the right of the vice president to do it. So I said, so you're saying I was right. The vice
interesting.
president did have the right to do it, and they said, yes, he did.
So if you're saying they stole it from you last time, why wouldn't they do the same this time?
Oh, well, they'll try. They're going to.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And not only me, you know. Look.
But the thing is, if you don't prop up some sort of like pandemic scare tactics, which we're actually seeing, you know, right now in the mainstream media at the moment, with the rise of some new COVID-19 virus, if you don't prop up some sort of, you know, pandemic that forces people to go into their homes, that then sort of drives everything towards some sort of mail-in ballot system, I don't see how you would see election irregularities to the same level as what we saw in 2020. And also another thing too is, you know, people are kind of getting old of hearing all the talk about COVID-19. Nobody really cares. It's not really a particularly deadly virus. I think people just want to move on with their lives. It's kind of like talking about Trump and his, you know, alleged misdeeds. It's old news. People are just ready to kind of like move on, especially with COVID, where it's like, you know, if you put people in lockdown, that's been shown to have similar psychological effects to throwing people in jail. And, you know what you hear when, you know, someone is committing crimes who has already been in jail before, is like, I ain't going back to jail. There are people who would risk getting shot by police rather than going back to jail. And I think you might see some sort of, you know, some sort of similar response here from many people if the government tries to push too hard on doing all these lockdowns again. So kind of interesting to see, but I just don't think that whatever shenanigans did or didn't happen in 2020, I don't think you'll see the same magnitude of those happening in 2024, because you're not going to be able to convince everyone to cower in fear in their homes just because we went through this circus before. You know, a very low percentage of the people who got COVID died. We're probably not going to see that many changes to that trend with this new variant. And so I think people, they realize now that they were kind of just told to quarantine with, I don't know, probably faulty statistics. And, you know, it is what it is, right? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But I think that they also realize that you can make a decision now not to open up a new cap. And I think that that's what a lot of people are going to call for when it comes to the citizenry. Now, the politicians are going to be completely different. The mainstream media is going to be completely different. They're going to say, run and hide, cower in your homes. But I just don't know how many citizens are going to buy that. And if not a lot of citizens buy that, then, you know, I don't know. I don't know how much you can cheat with mail-in ballots if people aren't going to want to stay at home and fill in mail-in ballots. So kind of interesting to see what happens on that front.
Out. I think he's gone. So he was at a level. People have figured him out. He's gone. But if somebody else got in, other than me, they'll go at him just as viciously as they did me. These people are sick. They will go after them. And a lot of people say they won't be able to hold up. I do get credit for holding up quite well, I must tell you. I think it's.
How do you do that? How do you get indicted, you know, every week and stay cheerful?
It's. I think it's a lot easier because I'm so high in the polls, because it means the people get it. The people see it's a.
That's right, because I think what he cares about the most is if people like him. I think that's like one of the major things to this guy. So as long as people like him, I think he'd be fine. If he was not facing any legal repercussions, but people didn't like him, he would be imploding, and he would be going bananas.
Fraud. The people see it, like this horrible district attorney from just a little while ago, from essentially Atlanta, that's Fulton County. She said, basically, I don't have any right to challenge an election. Well, what about Stacey Abrams? What about Hillary Clinton? What about all of these Democrats that are still challenging my election? The same people that are saying he's challenging an election challenged my election.
Yep.
And they did it with slates. They did it with all sorts of things. They were very bad.
I don't think that they did it to the same degree that a lot of the Trump supporters in 2020 did, though. I think it's probably fair to point that out.
Very bad about it. But basically, they're suing me, and they're saying, you don't have any right to challenge it. If you challenge an election, we're going to indict you and put you in jail. So what they're doing is they've weaponized, and don't kid yourself, the DOJ and Biden and the whole group, they're watching all of this stuff. They love the local stuff. You know, the DA in Manhattan. Not only that, they put one of the DOJ top people into the Manhattan DA's office to run things. They don't even have a case against me. It's not even a case. Everyone says, even the Democrats say, you can't bring these cases. You have no case.
It depends on the case, though. Because I think that there are like a couple cases where, a couple of things where it does look like there might be a case. I think that there's the whole thing of the, showing the classified documents to other people, but, they still have yet to prove that that was indeed a classified document that he showed. So they have to prove that. But if they can prove that, then I think there's a legal case there. And also there's the case of the whole Georgia phone call, which I think this indictment is actually over the perfect phone call, in large part when it comes to like the arrest, the mugshot, all of that stuff. So there's that too. Now I think that they have to prove that Trump was intending to, conspire to get someone to break some sort of law, which I don't think that they really did. There's also legal stuff in here about like some lawyer letting them into an area to inspect ballot machines or something. But that wasn't really anything that he had planned. It was just something that, the folks who were running the election in that particular jurisdiction told him that he could do. So he did it with his team. Both of these things, I think there's still mountains to climb, where it's like you have to prove that he was showing, classified documents. You have to prove that, he was intending to plan some sort of illegal activities when it came to the Georgia election results. But if you could prove both those things, I think you do have two legitimate legal cases against Donald Trump. And I don't think that those are things where it's completely cut and dry as far as we know of all the information that we've been given that he is guilty or he is not guilty. I'm not mad that these things are being legislated, by the way. I just think that they should have been legislated like years ago when they happened. And it is it's extremely awful that they have kept these instances in their back pockets until just now so that they can try and keep Donald Trump from being president. And that thing alone almost makes me feel like there's not really much legal standing, because if they could put him in jail earlier, I think they probably really would have, if I'm going to be honest. But that's just my guess and pure speculation and conjecture. This is all opinion.
The Attorney General or the District Attorney, Fannie Willis, in Atlanta, she's getting killed.
Oh, yes, I'm hearing that people are considering impeaching her. I think that story came out today, so that's rather interesting.
Basically, she's saying Trump doesn't have the right to criticize an election. But you've been around long enough now. You've seen many elections criticized. I mean, Hillary Clinton goes crazy. Every time she talks, she says, he's not the president. Jimmy Carter said, he's not the president. Well, I am the president. Hillary Clinton called me, by the way, at 3:02 in the morning to congratulate me the night of the election.
Did her voice crack?
Well, her voice was it's very difficult. I won't get into that.
What kind of question is that, too? That would not be my first question, right? Like, oh, Hillary Clinton called you, huh? Well, did her voice crack?
What do you mean?
Her voice was very different. Don't forget, they were all celebrating at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I came home and I said, I think we won. I felt we won because the rallies are so big. We'd go to Wisconsin and we'd go to Georgia. We'd go to different states. In Michigan, we'd have rallies. In Pennsylvania, we had 58,000 people in Butler. And I said, how are we losing this? How do you have a rally where you have from 50 to 100,000 people, many of them? I did 7 a day for a couple of days. That's a lot. These are big rallies, too. And I didn't hold back. I didn't say, let's make them let's do abbreviations, right? But they challenged the stuff. Yeah. Hillary called me up and conceded. Now, the word is that Obama said you have to do that. But she called up and totally conceded. But now, every time you see her on television, she's saying, like, well, she's challenging the election.
Do you think...
So that would mean that she should be indicted, but that would mean also that Stacey Abrams in Georgia should be indicted, because she still thinks she won the election for governor. She still thinks that. She's never recanted. And
Do you think Stacey Abrams will be indicted for that?
No, of course not. She won't be. The Democrats don't get indicted for things like that. They
Yes,
don't get
true.
impeached. No, it's a different thing. With that being said,
yes,
I had great support when they did impeachment hoax #1 and impeachment hoax #2. Jim Jordan, the House was fantastic. And actually the Senate was very good for me, other than, Mitch McConnell. I think if he had, it's too bad I endorsed him. He was begging, he was going to lose that race, and I endorsed him, and he ended up winning the race because of my endorsement. He was down, he was going to lose to Amy McGrath, who had $90 million in cash, all set to go. She was leading by 3. He was going down. I did him a favor, and then 3-4 months later, he really wanted to impeach me. He's a bad guy. But if you look at what's going on
By the
politically...
way, I have noticed this when it comes to Trump and his rhetoric. He makes it seem like, or he speaks as if, just because he does something nice for someone else, that they owe him something. And, I don't know how accurate the politics of Designated Survivor is, but I kind of got the gist that based on that show, that's how a lot of politics works. And if that's accurate, it should be considered that, he might be, beholden to folks who are other than Trump, right? I think that's just something that Trump might lose sight of. And if that's not true, then other politicians are not obligated to do whatever you want them to do just because you helped them win an election one time. First of all, that's just kind of like un-American and not exactly democratic, right? Because these politicians aren't even behaving as free agents, but just like the puppet of whoever happened to do them the most favors. So I don't even like that mentality. I think the idea that just because you did somebody a favor one time, they have to do everything that you want them to do later on that's just silly, man.
So interesting. The level of loyalty is different in politics than it is in normal life, I will say. With that being said, I've had great loyalty also. But the House was fantastic. The Senate was very good. They overrode Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, in my opinion, was trying to get senators to impeach me, especially for the second one. And on the first one, he acted very, very slow. He should have gone much faster. But Mitch McConnell wanted to, and the senators went up to him, guys that are subservient to him because he gives money. He gives them money. He gives them a lot of money. He raises some money and he gives it to them, and therefore they do what he said. That's the only form of leadership he's got.
So last question, if you're elected president again, what's your number one priority? When you ran last time, you said, I will build a wall. This time, your bottom line top promise to the country.
So you can do numerous things at the same time.
Of course.
But let's say number one is a border. And taking hundreds of thousands of criminals that have been allowed into our country and getting them out and bringing them back to their country, Guatemala. By the way, not only the 4 countries that we think of as neighbors, all over the world. Last month, we had 149 countries represented. Think of it. We had 149 countries represented, Tucker, from places that many people never even heard of, coming into our country. And they're coming in from mental institutions, and they're coming in from prisons. They're emptying out their prisons all over South America. They're emptying out their mental institutions. Terrorists are pouring into our country. We have no idea. I had the strongest border in the history of our country, and I built almost 500 miles of wall. They like to say, oh, was it less? No. I built 500 miles effective.
Right. It was a semantics game. I made a video about this, actually. That a lot of that wall was repaired. It's not built up from scratch, but he did have it built. So it doesn't really matter whether or not it was like it existed before or not. He did help build 500 or so miles of border wall.
You check with the authorities on the border. We built almost 500 miles of wall, and I had another 200 that I was going to build. It's like water. It seeks. And we're going to build another 200. We built it. It was all set to go. All they had to do was install it. It would have taken 3 weeks. And that's when I found out. I said, I think these people actually want open borders. The first thing I would do would be I would seal up the border good and tight, except for people that want to come in legally.
Do you think we're moving towards civil war?
It's a left turn.
There's tremendous passion and there's tremendous love. You know, January 6th was a very interesting day.
Politician
because they don't
answer.
report it properly.
It's a politician answer. What a politician answer.
I believe it was the largest crowd I've ever spoken before. And you know some of the crowds I've spoken before. And like July 4th on the mall, I think they had 1 million people there. But I think that the biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was on January 6th. And people that were in that crowd, a very, very small group of people, and we said patriotically and peacefully and patriotically, right? Nobody ever says that. Go peacefully and patriotically. But people that were in that crowd that day, very small group of people, went down there, and then there are a lot of scenarios that we can talk about. But people in that crowd said it was the most beautiful day they've ever experienced. There was love in that crowd. There was love and unity.
Well,
I have
until the violence started, right? Like you have to bring that up.
Never seen such spirit and such passion and such love.
Well, the love, I don't know, but I assure you I have not seen such passion and spirit until that day, unless we're including like Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests, in which cases a fair bit of, passion and spirit in those events as well. Also the Kai Cenat riots for the PS5 giveaways in New York, some passion there as well.
And I've also never seen simultaneously and from the same people such hatred of what they've done to our country.
So do you think it's possible?
Interesting. So it sounds like what he's saying is a lot of the people who were there peacefully are mad at the minority of people who were violent. That makes sense.
That there's open conflict. We seem to be moving towards something.
I don't know, because I don't know what it, I can say this. There's a level of passion that I've never seen. There's a level of hatred that I've never seen, and that's probably a bad combination.
Donald Trump, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you.
That is a bad combination, by the way.
Bad combination.
It is a bad combination.
Thank you.
Huh. Well, that was an interesting interview. I will say it doesn't really seem like something that will advance Trump like in the election. I don't think it'll advance his candidacy, because so much of it was focused on the past, talking about alleged riggings of elections, to the point where it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do in the future? The only thing he said was like, we're going to build up the border. We're going to do, talk to the president of, Russia and China to get them to calm down. But there are a lot of other issues that are facing the nation that need to be addressed. There's the culture war things that people would at least appreciate hearing a stance on from the president, even if he can't really do much on the culture war. I know that Ron DeSantis thinks otherwise, and have a whole video about that. There's stuff going on with inflation. There's a lot of stuff going on in this country that I think that Trump just didn't really talk about. And I think that all of his picks in the midterms kind of showed that Trump is out of touch with the GOP base. So excluding my own personal feelings about the guy, which are generally negative at this point, I do think that he is, if you pay attention more to what he says than the fact that this is Daddy Trump, the MAGA king, I think that this was a miss. And I think that this just solidifies the fact that he is not in touch with the GOP base as much as someone like Vivek Ramaswamy, or as much as someone who, I hate to say it, but someone like Ron DeSantis. They both are in touch, with the GOP base in very specific ways, but they are in touch with the GOP base in ways that Donald Trump just plain isn't. And I think a lot of people are losing sight of that. And now, of course, he has star power, so a lot of people are going to vote for him. Oh, sorry. He has star power, so a lot of people are going to vote for him. But for me, I like rooting for who is going to be the best president, right? Not just who is going to be the coolest looking or sounding or seeming, or who is, going to be the most popular, and I'll just like vote with the crowd. Like, No, sometimes the best candidate is not the one that has the most votes. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is the best candidate for the GOP, for example. He entered that debate this week with like 7% support. So, but anyways, I'll let you guys all make up your minds. If you support Trump, go support Trump. That's on you. I don't really like the dude, but it is what it is. But anyways, I'd like to know what you guys thought of this interview. I think it was relatively frivolous, if interesting to a certain degree. But, I don't think that Trump hurt himself with this interview. I just don't think it was particularly, I think it was pointless to a degree. Not completely, but to a degree. And I think it's unfortunate that, especially since he was doing this at the same time as the GOP debate, that it just wasn't more substantive. But it is what it is. Maybe I'm the one out of touch with the GOP base, and you guys will need to set me straight in the comment sections below.